Hi, mates. Welcome back to the channel. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Everybody's doing well. This is kind of a added-on bonus for the folks. I asked me for some urban fishing spots when I did that Rock Creek video, when I talked about in the video about spots further down Rock Creek that you could fish urban-wise, like lunch break or, after work, those kind of things in the urban setting, right? You know, when most people think of the District of Columbia, they don't really think outside of the Potomac River of places that they can fish, right? But Rock Creek, as I talked about in that video, and I did the Lake Needwood video, Lake Needwood is up here in the Rock Creek Regional Park, okay? And it was the damming of Rock Creek, okay, in the late 60s. But Rock Creek travels all the way down through, as you can see here, Rockville, North Bethesda, actually parts of Kensington, as well as Chevy Chase, and then down into DC. And what you can see here, I'll highlight this a little bit, you can see here is how much environmental ease there is in terms of trails and protected habitat along this creek, okay? So here's Rockwood, Needwood, okay, Rock Creek, okay, Frank, and then all of this that goes down in this green that you see here is actually protected, okay? So it won't ever be developed, all right? No houses or any of that stuff, and it runs all the way through down. And these creeks can be as wide, in some places, as 20 yards to 25 yards wide to as narrow as 5 yards in places throughout this as it winds through Garrett Park, North Kensington here. Okay, then it goes through the Locust Hill Neighborhood Park, turns east towards South Kensington, and then winds south through Chevy Chase. Okay, right here, when you reach this triangle right here, you're right. This is the District of Columbia. Okay, and so I'm going to try and get a little bit area here, focused in a little bit more on this. Okay, and Rock Creek comes down. We're below 495 now. Okay, so it's down below 495, coming south, then east again. And this is going to take it all the way to behind the National Zoo in D.C. But before you get to that spot, there is some really, really good bass, catfish, and panfish style fishing in this creek, in the urban setting of D.C. Now, and when I say urban, this area is actually not what you would think when you think of the District of Columbia. It has a more of a rural setting to it, okay? In terms of it's not nearly as developed. It's not like city, okay? In this part of the triangle, okay? And so it winds all the way down. There's plenty of places. These are all trails, mates. Trails, biking trails, running trails, for everything that run all along this area, okay? And where the creek winds all the way down through DC, okay? And let's get back right in the Hamilton Park area right here. Let me enlarge that a little bit more. Let's look for Brightwood. There we go. Brightwood Rec Center. This area right here, okay, really from the bend. If you want to take Rock Creek Park, Piney Branch Parkway, you've got Piney Branch and Rock Creek kind of come together. You got bridges there. It's a little deeper, wider. This section that runs from here all the way down, okay, and right in here is a really, really good section. You can fish on either side. You've got you've got trails that run alongside it, so you're always going to see people. It's not like you're going to be alone. And that section, I want to say that's probably, it's probably about a mile and a mile and a quarter of really good, just consistent throughout the year, especially spring. Okay, spring to early summer is a lot more fish up in there. And so that would be the first spot really to really hit. And then the second spot is further down to where you've got the towpath. You're going to get into some embassies down towards Georgetown. You've got bridges that you can fish. So let's move down here. You're going to see Rock Creek going to run all the way down through here. And in places it gets wide, it turns. And the same like logic applies to these creeks that you would apply to rivers in terms of the bends, okay? This is going to take you behind the National Zoo, all right? Rock Creek's going to go run all the way behind the National Zoo, come back, and then shoot the gap here. This gap right here. Let's see if I can't get a little bit more enlargement on that. You've got bridges here galore, okay, which often have a lot more rock, a lot more deeper areas, deeper pools in this creek than what you would find normally. So a lot of times you are going to find fish all in this section from really the bridge. Let's move this up a little bit. Really in the middle of these two bridges right here on Rock Creek. And then obviously actually below, and then when you get here to center parking. And then you're going to continue to flow down here from this stretch. And this is going to begin the legs, like a dog leg, you know what I mean, all the way down to the upper Potomac, okay? You got a bunch of embassies all throughout here that are kind of littering both sides, really. Okay, you got Francis Park, Rose Park, okay, all right here. Again, the same kind of pattern here with bridges you can get to above or below with that regard. And you're going to make your way straight down to Foggy Bottom, okay? And we all know beyond that we've got Georgetown, okay? So when you get down to this point, okay, this stretch from in Georgetown, the fish really begin to be a little bit more prolific, and you tend to get a lot more bass coming in from the lower Potomac, okay, right here. You've also got the Waterfront Park area, which is a huge urban fishing spot for anybody who's from D.C. or Maryland. It's very familiar with the Waterfront Park area, fishing for catfish, white perch, bass. Really all depends, and a number of other things all along that section of the waterfront boardwalk, okay, that basically runs all through here. But then this still is Rock Creek right here. Here's the lock, okay? These locks, this area here, all the way down to where it empties in to, you got GW over here, all the way it ends in the lock into the lower Potomac River. And so it becomes a really easy to get to. And when I'm talking about this urban fishing, mates, I'm just talking about fishing from the bank, okay? Rock Creek, obviously fishing from the bank. You don't really see people get out in that creek, really, because a lot of times the banks are higher than really what you might be familiar with in terms of rivers and things like that. And a lot of people obviously are fishing along this boardwalk. You can step down depending on what the tide is. Remember, this is a tidal fishery in this point, mates. This is not the upper Potomac, okay? So this is very indicative of the tidal chart and what you're going to look at in terms of the fishing times, the ebb and the flow of the tides, okay? But basically, I mean, you just throw the kitchen sink at them here in this stretch, you're going to catch catfish, okay? You just are. But you also at times will get into a lot of bass, and it becomes almost a transitional zone a lot of times because there's more largemouth, but there are smallies that get taken, to get an idea of where that really is in relation to Virginia. You got Key Bridge and all that running along this side of the river. To give you Theodore Roosevelt, Iwan's in the middle. You've got the bridges. And you can kind of see here. So it's a pretty easy access. If you're from the Virginia side, it's pretty easy to access to come into D.C. Remember, you got to have a D.C. fishing license for these places, and then you have to have a Maryland fishing license if you're fishing up towards Needwood, through Kensington, Chevy Chase, Bethesda, North Bethesda, all the way at Rockville. That's all Maryland. So you got to have a Maryland fishing license for that, and then you got to have a D.C. fishing license for the Georgetown waterfront, the Lock area, the towpath, Scenic towpath, all the way up beyond the zoo, and then back up to Brightwood. I don't really see it get too crazy in terms of policing, like for fishing licenses. I mean, it does happen. It happens probably more down here, I think, than it does up in the upwards of the creeks and stuff, further up. But again, you got to be cognizant of that. On the Maryland side, you will, because on the Maryland side, you have a park police type component to that whole stretch. The park police can run that whole stretch that they monitor, and they monitor it for obvious reasons, for people parking cars or people sleeping in cars and all that in the park on the side of the road and all the way up, because it's basically like a parkway. You've got Beach Road runs basically parallel to Rock Creek all the way up to like Rockville, and from Kensington to like Rockville. And so people will pull over on the side of the road, park their car, and then go and fish and stuff. And so, I mean, occasionally you see them more just patrolling, but occasionally, they will stop you. Usually it's the summertime. Definitely not nearly as much as in the fall and winter. But that's really the look at what you got. Rock Creek, like I said, extends. You can see here again, this is where it empties out right here into the lower Potomac, adjacent to Georgetown and Washington, running all the way back up to Rockville, okay, which is up here, okay. It's in this section right in here. And it stops at that Lake Needwood, okay? So it's just like it's a confluence of Fish Lake, Needwood, and Frank, and that part up there, which has all the same fish, actually has some trout. And then that creek runs straight down after being dammed up, straight on down all the way from here through all this, all the way down to the lower Potomac. So those are just two spots. This is basically hit or miss. I mean, I fished other parts in Maryland, just over the Maryland line in D.C. and Rock Creek, and caught a few fish. They're just not nearly as prolific in the Maryland sections a lot of times than they are down in the D.C. The closer you get to D.C., around the zoo and below the zoo down to Georgetown. I think you have more fish pushing up into those locks and the creeks down there than you do. You have resident fish that are that far up. But you will catch some fish. It's just not nearly, as prolific in terms of quantity that you're going to get towards, into D.C. And down towards Georgetown. So I hope that helped everybody out. I just want to do that video because I had a bunch of questions asked about where some spots are. So check those out. If you have any other questions, you certainly can message me at JL Scott Fishing and Eats on Facebook or on TikTok, JL Scott Fishing. As well as comment in the video section. All right, mates.